It began with a silence so unnatural, so absolute, that it terrified even the men who designed it. A weapon so invisible that it left no smoke, no flash, no trace, only consequences. The United States had spent decades whispering about technologies meant to level the battlefield without firing a single traditional shot, but this one was different. It didn't roar like artillery or streak across the sky like missiles. It didn't detonate, burn, or explode. Instead, it slipped through the air like a ghost, reached deep into the nervous system of a nation, and shut it down from within. If ever deployed, Russia would have only minutes to react, minutes it would never have. Every intelligence file on the weapon remained classified under layers of secrecy, but scattered testimonies and leaked research pointed to one terrifying truth. America's most powerful weapon didn't kill soldiers or destroy tanks. It killed a nation's ability to function. The project started quietly inside a windowless laboratory deep in the American Southwest, a place so remote that even satellites weren't allowed to capture images of its construction. Engineers and physicists arrived with no explanation, escorted by military police and flown into airstrips that didn't officially exist. Their task? Build a device that could cripple a nuclear superpower without triggering the global catastrophe of mutually assured destruction. Traditional weapons couldn't do it. Missiles were traceable, aircraft could be intercepted, and cyberattacks could be reversed. What the Pentagon wanted was faster, cleaner, quieter, something Russia couldn't see coming and couldn't prove even after it hit. Rumors spoke of a breakthrough in the early 2000s when DARPA scientists achieved a near-perfect model of electromagnetic energy concentration, far stronger and far more precise than the EMP concepts studied during the Cold War. Unlike nuclear EMP blasts, which required warheads and caused global fallout, this one was purely technological. No radiation, no explosion, no mushroom cloud. It could be mounted on aircraft or satellites, fired across borders, and leave entire military systems non-functional in seconds. If the lights in Moscow suddenly blinked out, if air defense radars froze mid-rotation, if nuclear command systems went dark, how would anyone know whether it was an attack, an accident, or something far worse? Classified documents from military budget reports hinted at strange line items hidden under electronic warfare modernization. Billions poured into programs known only by code: Black Star, Silent Storm, and the one insiders whispered about the most: Project Hades. No scientist dared speak its real purpose outside secure rooms, but those who worked on it described an energy signature so powerful that even test facilities shook during early trials. Computers fried, vehicles stalled, communications died. In a controlled desert test in 2011, an entire mock military base went silent in less than 8 seconds. Not a single engine restarted, not a single drone lifted off again. Russia's intelligence service, the FSB, noticed something was wrong long before the world learned anything. Their satellites detected unusual American aircraft patterns over the Pacific. Their radar systems occasionally glitched without explanation whenever U.S. reconnaissance planes flew nearby. At first, Russian generals believed it was simple electronic jamming. But jamming had limits. This weapon had none. It didn't just interfere with signals, it erased them. Entire circuits were overloaded beyond repair. Moscow panicked quietly, fearing they had nothing to counter it. Their nuclear command posts had backups, but even those backups depended on electronics, and every new intelligence report suggested America's silent weapon could reach deeper than anyone expected. By 2014, during rising tensions in Eastern Europe, Russian analysts reported a mysterious event near the Baltic Sea. A Russian warship experienced total navigation failure when a U.S. aircraft flew within 90 kilometers. Engines stalled, radar screens went black, the ship drifted helplessly for nearly 2 hours. Russia claimed it was sabotage. The United States denied everything. But for the first time, Russia understood the terrifying possibility. America had developed something that could disable an entire fleet without firing a single missile. American officials never confirmed anything, but they didn't deny it either. The Pentagon's subtle silence was louder than words. Analysts noted that American strategic doctrine shifted around this time, emphasizing command disruption warfare, a concept that focused not on destroying enemy forces, but on disabling their ability to communicate or respond. If Russia could not launch missiles, deploy aircraft, or activate countermeasures, then the war was won before it even began. The weapon's real purpose became clear: neutralize a nuclear superpower before it could pull the trigger. And in the shadowy world of global conflict, that made it the most dangerous machine ever created.
Inside the Pentagon, a team of elite strategists developed scenarios for when and how the silent weapon might be used. Russia's geographic depth, once its greatest defense, was now its greatest weakness. The weapon didn't care about terrain or borders. It cared only about where electricity flowed. Critical systems, power grids, missile silos, communication networks, early warning radars were connected through vast webs of circuitry. Disrupt the network with a powerful enough electromagnetic pulse, and the entire structure collapsed instantly. The strategy was simple in theory, but terrifying in practice. A U.S. aircraft, likely a modified stealth platform, would approach Russian airspace at high altitude, staying outside missile range. At a pre-calculated coordinate, it would activate the weapon, releasing a concentrated electromagnetic beam aimed directly at Russian defensive systems. The pulse would travel at the speed of light. No soldier could outrun it. No missile defense system could intercept it. Russia would never know the weapon was coming until the lights went dark. Russian air defenses, among the most advanced in the world, were built to track missiles, drones, and aircraft, but not energy. Energy leaves no contrail, no radar signature, and no flight path. It doesn't show up on infrared cameras. It doesn't make noise. In a battlefield simulation held by the Pentagon, the weapon disabled an entire grid of air defenses across an area the size of Western Russia in under 3 minutes. Russian radar arrays, hardened against cyberattacks and nuclear EMPs, were powerless. The weapon bypassed shielding, overloaded circuits from within, and permanently disabled vital systems. Russian commanders watching the simulation reportedly asked a single question: if this occurs in reality, do we even have a country left to defend? Meanwhile, on the American side, engineers worked quietly to refine the weapon's portability. Early prototypes required massive generators, but advances in solid-state power modules reduced the system's size dramatically. A later version, known only as Variant 3B, could allegedly fit inside a large drone. Intelligence rumors suggested a satellite-mounted version was being tested, capable of firing pulses anywhere on Earth at a moment's notice. If true, Russia's defenses were not just vulnerable, they were obsolete. Russia knew it had to respond, but every attempt failed. Their scientists tried to recreate the effect, but lacked the materials and the classified research. They experimented with counter-EMP shielding, but the silent weapon operated on a frequency they couldn't block. The more they resisted, the more they realized the truth. The United States had leaped decades ahead in electronic warfare. Russian President Vladimir Putin publicly warned that any attack on Russia's strategic systems, electronic or physical, would be considered an act of war. But even as he spoke, Russian intelligence analysts quietly updated their reports. If the silent weapon were used, Russia might not even be able to declare war. Their command lines would be severed. Their nuclear launch protocols would fail. Their early warning systems would be dead. Russia would be blind, deaf, and immobilized. In 2020, during the height of geopolitical tension, U.S. and Russian aircraft nearly clashed over the Black Sea. Russian pilots later reported unexplained malfunctions during the encounter. Radars went dark, targeting systems froze, and communications cut out. American aircraft, meanwhile, flew away effortlessly, untouched. The incident was buried under diplomatic language, but those who understood electronic warfare knew exactly what had happened. A demonstration, a warning, a reminder that America's silent weapon was no longer theoretical. As tensions grew, whispers inside NATO suggested the weapon had reached its fourth generation, more precise, more powerful, more selective. Not only could it shut down entire regions, but it could also pinpoint targets down to individual facilities. A Russian missile silo could be disabled, while leaving nearby civilian infrastructure untouched. A command bunker could lose power while the city above remained lit. It wasn't just a weapon, it was control. Russia responded with louder rhetoric, stronger threats, and riskier military maneuvers, but fear lingered under every decision. They had built nuclear submarines to ensure second strike capability, but new intelligence showed the silent weapon could disable submarine communication systems as well. They invested in hardened underground command bunkers, but the weapon's pulse could travel through the earth and overload buried circuits. There was no escape. For the first time since the Cold War, Russia confronted a terrifying possibility. America had a weapon that could end a war instantly, without destroying a single city. It wasn't about death, it was about paralysis. A superpower rendered powerless by silence. And silence, in the modern age, meant defeat.
By 2023, global analysts agreed. If a major conflict erupted between the United States and Russia, the silent weapon would be the opening strike. It would attack not soldiers, but systems. Russia's military, heavily reliant on digital networks, would collapse internally before it could mobilize. Aircraft would remain grounded, missile sites would remain offline, naval fleets would drift aimlessly. Nuclear warning systems, Russia's greatest deterrent, would fail completely. American strategists viewed this as a humanitarian advantage. No civilian deaths, no physical destruction, no nuclear retaliation, no cities burned to ash. But Russia saw it differently. To them, the weapon was existential, a tool that could erase a nation without firing a bullet. Inside Kremlin command rooms, generals debated how to defend against an attack they couldn't see. Some proposed reverting to analog systems, paper maps, manual targeting, mechanical guidance systems. Others argued for underground fiber optic networks immune to electromagnetic disruption. But none of their solutions addressed the core problem. The silent weapon didn't target networks, it targeted electricity itself. Any device powered by electrons was vulnerable. That realization changed everything. With each year, America continued refining the weapon, reducing its energy signature and increasing its range. By 2025, analysts suggested it could cripple an entire continent from over 600 miles away. If fired from a stealth platform, Russia would never detect the launch. If fired from orbit, Russia would never detect the platform. This was the ultimate weapon, not because it destroyed, but because it controlled. A weapon designed not for visible war, but for invisible dominance. Inside Kremlin command rooms, generals debated how to defend against an attack they couldn't see. Some proposed reverting to analog systems, paper maps, manual targeting, mechanical guidance systems. Others argued for underground fiber optic networks immune to electromagnetic disruption. But none of their solutions addressed the core problem. The silent weapon didn't target networks, it targeted electricity itself. Any device powered by electrons was vulnerable. In Moscow, paranoia grew. Russian leaders increased patrols, hardened bunkers, and built redundant communication lines, but they knew none of it mattered. The weapon didn't care about walls or layers of protection. It cared about circuits, and every system Russia relied upon had circuits. During a high-level meeting in the Kremlin, one general reportedly said, "This is not a weapon of war. It is a weapon of extinction." Another replied, "It is a weapon that ends nations without firing a shot." But the most chilling question was one no one dared to ask publicly. Had America already tested the weapon on Russia without them knowing? Would they even know if it had been used? Would anyone? In a world of digital dependence, a weapon that could erase technology was more powerful than any nuclear bomb. Without communication, there is no command. Without power, there is no defense. Without electronics, there is no modern civilization. The silent weapon represented the end of warfare as humanity understood it. A new era where wars were not fought with explosions, but with disappearing signals. Where nations didn't fall through destruction, but through stillness. If the silent weapon were ever fired in full, Russia would have minutes to watch everything go dark before the world changed forever. Minutes to realize that the war had already been lost. Minutes to understand that the most dangerous weapon of the modern age was not the one that made the most noise, but the one that made none. And in that silence, the fate of nations would be decided.